Hey guys, I just wanted to share with you a few tricks that I learned from my latest single, Ascension. There's a couple effects in there or neat little moves that really helped me out with this mix, and I thought they might be helpful to you. So let's jump into it. So the first thing is probably an effect that you're very familiar with, this sort of phone filter effect. Ideally, it seems like it's an easy thing to do, but it can be hard to get it to have the right impact. So since the intro is this phone filter effect, your ears kind of adapt to that and get used to the brightness of it. So when the actual mix kicks in, even though it is the ideal level of brightness and mid-range and low-end, it can sound a bit mushy in comparison. So I was having trouble figuring out how to get it to balance, how to get it to ease in. So I'm going to show you how I went through this. So the first thing I did, you can see here, these are all my regular tracks. These are the drums, the bass, the guitars. And then I had the intro here with the clean guitars and some of the drums and the bass. And I just cut all that stuff off and bounced it into a single file, which is what I've got right here. So if I play this without the plugins on it, you'll hear they just sound like regular drums and a clean guitar. So they're fairly balanced. I didn't worry too much about like getting them to sound really awesome and precise because I knew I was going to put an effect on it. The main thing that people are going to tell you is to roll off the lows and the highs with a high pass filter and a low pass filter. What's tricky though is you got to know the right level for doing that. So for the high end, I think I tried to take out as many highs as I could without it becoming too dull. You still want it to have kind of a crispy phone filter sound, but I didn't want it to be too bright because I wanted the brightness from the actual mix to be very apparent and have a lot of impact. I tried to roll off as much as I could. It looks like I got to about 4.5 kHz. And then for the low end, I ended up rolling off to about 300 hertz. And then I've got a couple of things here. There were a few like weird frequencies that I kind of pulled out. I think some of the frequencies that really cut, I was trying to sort of dole it, and then I tried to boost some of the mids here to give it like some presence, but kind of in the more of the mid-range, not in the upper highs. You can also see I'm pulling out quite a bit of like kind of mud. I think this is from the toms or something, just some boominess at 280. So here's what it sounds like with the EQ applied. So when you compare it back to back, like it's an obvious difference. Like, oh yeah, that doesn't sound like a full mix. But the problem was this is the intro of my song. So I really wanted people to get that this was a phone filter effect. If you just apply the EQ, it almost sounds like just a terrible mix. Like, this mix, is it just me or does this mix sound really funny? It's like, I didn't want people to think that. I wanted them to understand, okay, this is an effect, and you know, I didn't want them to click away like, man, this mix sucks. So to really drive that effect, I decided to put it through an actual like speaker and a slight distortion. Now, you want to be really subtle here, but what I used was the Guitar Amp Pro, and if you look at my settings, I left mostly everything at neutral, and then I tried to pull the gain down as much as possible while still getting that effect. I think I did play around with a few different, a few different speakers and maybe some different EQs. I tried to find one that was very subtle, and then the same thing here. I tried to find like really subtle, but having that kind of speaker effect. So here's what it sounds like with the speaker. You can hear that has much more of that kind of phone filter effect to it. But that also introduces kind of some weird frequencies, so I applied one more EQ, pulled out a little more of this boominess from the toms and stuff, and also some weird, I think, some ringing frequencies up here. And that just kind of cleaned it up and gave it even more of that speaker sound. So here's what that sounds like applied. And yeah, that's all there is to it. So it's a fairly simple trick, but at the same time, you want to make sure that it's going to work in context with your song. If it's at the very beginning of the song, you really want to sell that effect, or people are just going to assume, like, man, this is kind of a weak mix, you know? Like, they're probably not going to wait for the duration of the intro to get to the actual song. The next effect I used, and this is the first time I've ever used this in a song, is I used some subs. These are just kind of some really big impact moments that happen at some of the bigger moments in the song. Now, I got this from my subscription to Nail the Mix. I purchased the Nolly Get Good Periphery month, and you get all the stems, and he used some subs. These were the ones he used, and he said they work for almost all the mixes he does, so I'm like, hey, I'm going to borrow these, you know. So I took them and I applied them to my own. I think it's important not to go overboard. You can see I got them at a few places here, but you don't have to do them at like every single drop. Try to save them. I think the more sparingly you use them, the more impactful they're going to be. Here's what the sub sounds like by itself. It's not super noticeable. In fact, it's not really supposed to be. It's really something that you feel. You might not really know when it's there, but you'll definitely know when it's gone. Here it is without the sub. And then here it is with the sub. So it's pretty subtle, but you can tell it just kind of adds a little more oomph to those, really big moments. This isn't something that's going to be like the first thing you add. This is definitely near the end of the mixing phase where I started throwing these in there, but just a little more icing on the cake, I guess. Okay, so these next two effects use kind of a similar method, but this is something that's really new to me and it was super helpful. I think it's really cool. So in this song, I got a couple rhythm guitars and I have a lead guitar and a harmony. And I kind of shot myself in the foot because I used the same tone for all the parts. Ideally, you would want to use a different tone for your lead parts than you did for your rhythm parts. That's an easy way to create separation, but I didn't do that, so I had to do a lot to try to make them stick out. So I went to my guitar bus, and this is controlling my rhythm guitars, and I added an EQ here, and you can see I've got a little notch here, a little cut at 1140 hertz, and I'm just cutting out 1.5 dB. That was a frequency range that sounded good on the lead guitars. It kind of had some nice presence to them. So by cutting it out of the rhythm guitars, it kind of lets them show more from the lead guitars. So I really like the way that sounded, but the lead guitars don't play through the whole song. So when we got to the sections where it's only the rhythm guitars, they lost a little bit of aggressiveness. They sound a lot better without that EQ. So I was at a compromise. I was like, do I leave it in? Do I take it out? What do I do? I could potentially make a whole new track just for those sections that doesn't have the EQ, but that would have been a lot of trouble to go through. But I found out this really cool thing. Your friend is automation. I always thought automation was just for volume and panning, but you can actually automate effects, and it's really cool. So I'm going to hit A, and that opens up the automation. And you can see I actually brought my guitar bus into the track so that I could automate it. And what I'm doing is you click here, and usually it's going to be set on volume, but you can actually pick specific plugins. So I went to my channel EQ plugin, and then these are all the different features on that plugin. So I went to peak 3, that was that's where I applied that EQ, and I selected that one. Now what I'm able to do is I'm able to leave it on during the section where the lead guitars are playing, and then over here you can see where the lead guitars stop playing. I'm able to bypass that band and turn it off. Now you could bypass the whole plugin, but I think I had another cut in there, and so I wanted to only affect that specific band. Watch how when I play this, you'll see that the cut is there, and then as soon as the lead guitars are finished, the cut will be bypassed. It's really cool, and I just leave it off and then I turn it back on whenever the lead guitar comes back, and yeah, super helpful tool. And then the last tip I want to share with you is a similar thing. We're going to be doing more automation. So for my lead guitars, I added a delay just to give them a little more epicness, but I realized there were certain sections where it sounded really good with the delay, and then certain sections where it sounded better without the delay. So the intro of the song has a lot of legato notes, so they're really lengthy, they're ringing out. That sounds really good with delay. But there's a few sections in the song where the lead guitar is playing, I guess, more staccato notes, the shorter ones, and the delay can get kind of messy, specifically in this section here. So again, I thought I would have to make a compromise or have to make a new track to do this, but no, you can just use automation. So here's what you do. Once again, you have to bring your bus into the timeline. So this is the lead guitar bus, and on this bus, I've got a tape delay on there. That's what I'm using. So you can see it's on during the intro section, but we want to cut it off for the other sections. So we're going to hit A, and same thing, we're going to select this, but instead of going to the tape delay, if you go to the tape delay, it only allows you to change some of the parameters of the actual plugin, but we just want to bypass the plugin in general. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to main, and you have to pick where you inserted it. So it was my 5th insert, so I select insert number 5, and now I can basically choose when it's on and when it's off. So you can see this blue line. When the blue line is down, that means it's on. And then we get further along in the song, right here, I bypass it, I turn it off. If you watch over here, you can actually see the plug-in bypass when we get to this marker here. So yeah, those were a few tricks I learned while working on this song, and I hope they're helpful to you like they were for me. Until next time.